All right, as I said this week, it's been, well, it's an annual conference, I think, the Trends Conference, where all the tourism entities in New Zealand get together, usually bemoan that they've got a lack of funding from either local or central government, but talk about, how they can assist each other, get more tourists here, improve their spend, improve the customer experience, and not irritate the locals too much, pretty much. Joining us to talk about the conference, what came out of it this week, and the only thing that I have seen that came out of it this week is it Greg Foran, the outgoing Chief Executive of Air New Zealand, having a crack at, the tourism industry in general, for being too slow out of the blocks post-COVID. I don't know what that meant, but given that the taxpayer actually funded Air New Zealand through COVID and funded it out, I'm struggling to see why the criticism's there, but we'll see. Anyhow, Matt Woods from Destination Queenstown, who was there, joins us now. Matt, welcome to the show. Good to see you again.
Great to be here. Thanks, Michael.
Listen, mate, where was Trends this year? Was it at Queenstown this year, was it?
No. It was actually up in Rotorua.
Oh, that's right. And they were moaning, weren't they, about the fact that Rotorua was dead and that a lot of the locals believe that tourism has not gone back to the pre-COVID times. Did you get that sense?
Yeah, look, I mean, this conference itself would have given them quite a boost, 1,200 delegates coming into Rotorua. And of course, right at the moment is a bit of a shoulder season for tourism in the entire country. So it does feel flat. However, in saying that, Rotorua has had a very strong summer, similar to what we've actually experienced down here in Queenstown and Wanaka as well.
Right. Okay. So one of the things I noticed and what the locals are complaining about is no one's coming into the city and going places. I went there, about a year ago, and it was dead, Matt. Is there a reason why, or do you think that, because New Zealand was very fashionable as a tourist destination, 10 years ago, prior to COVID anyhow, we'd had, Hobbit and Lord of the Rings and all that sort of stuff and the impetus that gave. We were quite fashionable. Are we fashionable still as a tourist destination? Are we affordable as a tourist destination?
Yeah, those are all great questions. And if we actually think about Queenstown and Wanaka in particular, which is the areas that Destination Queenstown and Lake Wanaka tourism overseas, we've seen visitation back to pre-COVID levels. So that would indicate that we are very fashionable and popular. And then, where we're seeing that visitation from, we're seeing a lot of it actually coming from domestic New Zealand. That's been quite a change. So before COVID, we were seeing roughly about 30% of our visitation coming from domestic. And sort of post-COVID, we're seeing actually 50% coming from domestic. So we're seeing a lot of domestic visitors wanting to come and enjoy, Central Otago, Queenstown and Wanaka and enjoy what we have down here. And then equally, our next cab off the rank, which is Australia is our most important international market. And so we're seeing a lot of Australians coming here. And of course, it's really easy for Australia to get here with the connectivity into Queenstown Airport. And we're fortunate that we are the only airport actually in New Zealand, or international airport, that has all four international carriers coming in. So that's being Air New Zealand, Qantas, Jetstar and Virgin. Virgin does not fly into the other airports around New Zealand. So they see obviously Queenstown as a highly productive and profitable route for them to actually fly. Yeah.
Oh, it's just ironic in actual fact, because I think you're almost entirely reliant upon Air New Zealand to get you out internally. There's the occasional Jetstar flight into Queenstown, so you're well served internationally, shockingly served domestically. Bloody expensive to fly internally in this country, as you know.
Well, and I guess that comes down to, Michael, if you're last minute or booking in time, like I actually booked a ticket at the moment for about 6 months out, and I was surprised at actually how good it is. So I guess it does come down to when you book, isn't it? And we're hearing a lot about that discussion with dynamic pricing, is when you book and how much you're going to pay for.
Oh, listen, it's usury. At the end of the day, Air New Zealand are bastards. Come on, let's be honest about it. They have been fleecing New Zealand domestically whilst trying to sort of sub-utilise domestic consumers for their international routes. I mean, they even are prepared to admit it. It's a difficult have, I have to say, which is why I won't be travelling Air New Zealand internationally ever. Matt, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the tourism industry, and in particular the trends that came out of the conference. What was the big tourism trend that you felt, or the next big thing that you feel that the tourism industry has got to grapple with? Is it? And then just to go a bit further on that one, because I'm also detecting a little bit of what I call tourism fatigue, particularly from places like Queenstown, and those who have large numbers of tourist visitors, but at the same time an infrastructure that is requiring significant rates increases to cope to a certain extent with those tourism numbers. Was there anything discussed about that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's worth understanding what trends is first and foremost, and then we can actually really unpack that if that's all right. And so, trends, this is the 31st year of trends. It is actually a trade selling event. So, what I mean by trade is that there's about 330 international buyers come to New Zealand, and they're meeting up with the New Zealand operators. So, the operators all around New Zealand are there selling their wares to the trade operators from around the world, and they're coming from primarily the three big markets being, Australia, the US, and China. And so there's that component of the operators selling to the trade agents, and from that point of view, it's very positive. What we're seeing is actually trade internationally is seeing New Zealand as a desirable place to come. They're seeing New Zealand as a very safe location, and in one of those places that actually they are promoting to actually come and enjoy and spend time here.
So just explain that. So just before you've just said 330 international buyers, and they're linking up. What sort of thing are they linking up with? What, bus companies, hotels, retail, restaurants? Or, particular attractions, or I don't know, like the gondola or the shot over jet or something? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I think about from Queenstown and Wanaka, we had roughly about 40 operators, and you're right. You've got the shot over jet, and you've got Skyline, and so they are there selling not just next year, but for multiple years, doing contracts with these trade agents from overseas to ensure that they have a pipeline of people that they can actually know to employ staff for, and also be able to build infrastructure and what they can expect in the future.
Right. Okay. So your I've got this view, and tell me it's listen. I'm freely admit my prejudices, but I live in, as you are aware, the Central Otago Lakes area, and I've always worked on the theory that the Chinese tourists in particular, who were huge, I thought they were larger in numbers prior to COVID. Maybe I've got that wrong. You'll be able to tell me, Matt.
No, you're
Um,
absolutely right.
is that
Yeah.
right? There were more coming prior to COVID. Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah. And so, look, the second part to this conference is there is conference, and so you've got people like the Prime Minister Christopher Luxon, you've got the Minister of Tourism, you've got Greg Forum presenting and giving us lots of different pieces of information of nationwide trends, not necessarily Queenstown and
Yeah.
Central Otago trends.
Yeah.
And you're right. So, in relation to China, we are seeing roughly 60% of the visitation of pre-COVID coming in. However, we actually have more air connectivity out of China coming into New Zealand. So there is more seats on planes coming into New Zealand, but less of the Chinese actually visiting. The measurement that we're not looking at, though, and this is a really important measurement, before COVID, is we were seeing what we'd call coach trips of Chinese coming to New Zealand. So
Yeah.
bus loads, and they'd come here, they'd get the photo, they'd go shopping, and they'd go home again.
Yeah.
And what we're now starting to see is groups of free independent travelers coming from China. So they're smaller groups, maybe families. They might be four or potentially up to an extended family of sort of intergenerational, so maybe up to eight. And they're staying here longer. They're also sitting in the front of the plane. So they are people with money that are prepared to spend on business class. They're prepared to spend their money in New Zealand, and they're prepared to spend more time in New Zealand. So we keep measuring the numbers of people, but what we're not actually doing is measuring length of stay and how much they're spending. And if you talk about economic growth, the most important thing is what are they spending when they're here and how long are they staying? So you can be busy chasing numbers of people, but that's actually not necessarily the growth. The growth is
No,
actually what they're
I
spending
accept
when
what
they're
you're
here in New Zealand.
saying, and are you telling me that those statistics they've got to be gathered, don't they? The quality, the length of the stay, and the amount of money they're spending. That somebody's got to be gathering that, don't they?
Well, you'd hope MB's actually gathering that, but at the moment we are really focused on numbers of people, and I think that's actually potentially the wrong measure when we're looking at growth. We need to be thinking how long they're staying and what are they spending.
Yes, but at the end of the day, if there's less of them, then that's less hotel rooms that they are staying in. That's less camper vans on the road. Well, I'm not going to have to get too upset about that. It's less retail stores that they're going to be visiting. If you're talking about numbers, have there been an increase in visitation from, well, United States and Australians? in comparison to
Yeah.
COVID, or is it roughly the same?
No, so I think this is the key thing. So here in Queenstown, we're experiencing that we have got visitation numbers back to pre-COVID levels.
Yeah.
So if you think about that summer season, which is still the busiest, however, in Queenstown, Monica, we actually are reasonably consistent year round, excluding May. May is the one shoulder season right now. So you're right, though, we are seeing stronger numbers of US coming in, and we're seeing stronger numbers from the US coming for the reason that, one, air connectivity. We have more flights again coming from the US into New Zealand, potentially when we look at these new routes like New York direct to Auckland. We've also got our weak dollar and their strong dollar. And more importantly, America is seeing New Zealand as a safe place to visit. And a good example of that is actually the cafe test. Americans can't believe that we would leave our cell phone on the table while we go to the bathroom. That's one of those things that New Zealand is seen as a safe place. And we forget that when we live here, Michael, that, you can actually do things like that in the cafe, but they're absolutely blown away with how safe this place is.
Yeah, well, but and particularly it has to be said, Queenstown Lakes. I mean, it is one of the safest places in New Zealand, which is why you've got so much internal migration as well, isn't it?
We do, and as we mentioned recently, this is one of the fastest growing districts. In the last 10 years, we've seen 70% growth
Yeah,
of
it's phenomenal. Yeah,
domestic
and
population.
it's not going to stop anytime soon.